you know.
What is this? Oh, we're now on YouTube. Okay. I don't know. Didn't know what it meant.
All right. I think that's everybody. Mr. LaPerry, if you're here, can you raise your hand so we can promote you? Thank you.
All right. And we have Michelle back, which is great. Hello, Michelle. What, Mr. LaPerry? Oh, geez. Wow. Very cool.
Can't hear anybody.
Thank you. I just got to adjust it a little bit.
Now I can.
Pretty fancy tech you got there. All right. All right. Chris, I'll treat the other attendees as this is a special meeting as likely members of the interested public. So just, was it *9 to hop off mute if you're on the phone, and then otherwise use the raise hand feature? Does that sound right?
Correct. When we get to the appropriate times, yes.
All right, fair enough. Michelle, you ready to go? All right, here we go, friends. Good evening and welcome to the August 16th, 2021 special meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Stephen Spur and I am chairman of the Summit Zoning Board. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision. And decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. This meeting is being conducted virtually via video conferencing in lieu of meeting in the council chamber at Summit City Hall, Summit, New Jersey. This meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page. In addition, members of the public can view and participate in the meeting by following the link provided on the agenda. Members of the public may also submit written comments and questions to the zoning board secretary in advance of the meeting to be read aloud during the meeting. Such written comments shall not be considered testimonial and shall not be considered by the board in its determination on any application. Individuals wishing to provide testimony as to any application must participate virtually with both audio and video enabled. Andy Ball is the zoning board's attorney. He will advise the board members on matters of law and is the key interface with an applicant's attorney. Mr. Ball does not vote on the applications. Chris Nicola is a city employee and is the zoning board secretary. Mr. Nicola works with applicants on getting their application together, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. Mr. Nicola also does not vote on the applications. Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in hearings tonight, but a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved. Some applications require 5 affirmative votes to be approved. You will be told which majority will be required before we begin our deliberations. Mr. Nicola, will you please call the roll of the members?
Sure. Chairman Spur.
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Newell.
Here.
Mr. Yuko.
Here.
Mr. Steiner.
Here.
Mr. Mullen.
Here.
Ms. Schwartzstein.
Here.
Mr. Malay.
Here.
Mr. Loikitz.
Here.
Ms. Toth.
Here.
And Ms. Sager is excused and Dr. Levine is also excused. We have a quorum. We can proceed.
Okay. We generally hear the cases in the order they are listed on the agenda. We try to have each hearing last no more than 30 minutes, but we do understand that some cases are too complex to be heard within that time frame. Each hearing begins with the applicant or their attorney giving an overview of the application and the variances that are required. We then hear from any expert witnesses the applicant may have to help explain the application and why the variances are needed. The board members may ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, and the expert witnesses. Once the board members and the board professionals are done with their questioning, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us what you think about this case. That opportunity comes at the end of the hearing. Before you ask your questions, we need to know who you are and where you live. It is important that our court reporter be able to keep a clear and accurate public record. Please state your name before speaking or asking a question. Please do not talk over each other. This is even more important under the current circumstances. After all witnesses have been heard, members of the audience have their second opportunity to speak, and at that time, you may express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. Then the public hearing is closed and we go into executive session where the board members discuss the case and vote. You will be able to listen to our executive session, but you will not normally be able to participate in the discussion. Most applications are heard and decided in the same evening. If a case requires additional information or testimony that cannot be presented tonight, we will carry your case to another date and it will not be decided tonight. Krista Anderson, the city zoning officer, has asked that I remind all applicants that they must read carefully the resolution that documents the zoning board's decision and to pay particular attention to the conditions contained in the resolution. For example, if the landscaping plan is required, you must obtain one and submit it to John Winson, the city's forester. If a grading plan is required, you must have one prepared by a civil engineer and submit 3 copies along with the application fee to the city's engineering division. Failure to satisfy all conditions in a resolution will result in a delay in approving your application, as it will cause extra work for city zoning staff. The resolutions documenting the board's decision will normally be available 1 month after we decide the case. When I call your name, please tell me how many witnesses you have and whether you think you can complete your case within 30 minutes. As this evening is a special meeting, the sole application we'll be hearing, in addition to a number of administrative items, is Richard and Evan Lyons, 101 Springfield Avenue. And with that, we can resume the case. I do want to make note, though, before we begin, that Scott Loikitz and Joe Steiner have both read the transcript and are eligible to vote on this application.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening. Again, my name is Michael Lepari. I'm with the law firm of Mandelbaum Salzburg. I represent the applicants who are sitting here next to me, Doctors Richard and Evan Lyons. This is an application for preliminary and final major site plan with a use variance and a couple related bulk variants as well. This is an application to permit a veterinary hospital in a neighborhood business zone. It's not permitted in the zone. It's not permitted in any zone. And we're going to recall some of our experts tonight, as well as an additional expert to opine on the traffic. But before we get there, I just want to express my sincere thank you and gratitude to everyone here tonight. I understand this is a special meeting and you guys have plans and families and lives outside of this. So we feel this is a very important application. We have the applicants who are trying to start a business that we feel is vital to the township, and we think it's very important. And by the overwhelming show of the professionals and the board members, we hope that you feel it as well. So again, we thank each and every one of you. Just a quick overview. Since the last hearing, we have revised our plans and submitted them for your consideration. What we are trying to do is address all of the concerns that the board members had expressed at the first hearing, the professionals, as well as the members of the public that had an opportunity to speak at the last hearing. We think we addressed all of the issues and concerns that the board had, and we think we have a really solid application. And right now I'm going to get to all of the different professionals who will testify as to the changes. They are, again, just for your information, we have the project engineer is Sharif Ali. Greg Clark is the project architect. We have engaged a traffic expert is Frank Miskovich, who will discuss the traffic and parking. And then we have Frank Antisel, who is our professional planner. And as I mentioned earlier, we still have the doctors here that can testify as to certain operational issues. So in order to keep this moving along quickly for you guys, I'd like to call my first witness, which is Sharif Ali of Amertech Engineering.
Before we do that, I just wanted to make one quick clarification based on the revised zoning officer's report. In it, she had mentioned the roof pitch, and she had specifically addressed that it did not conform to the ordinance requirement of 6-on-12. I have confirmed with the zoning officer today just to address that. The requirement is actually only 4-on-12. That's provided in section 35-13.13. So assuming the testimony tonight is consistent with the revised plans of 4.5-on-12, that would indeed be consistent with the ordinance requirements. Just want to avoid any confusion going forward with that one.
Okay. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ball. I appreciate that. And our architect will discuss that after the engineer testifies. So Mr. Ali you've already been accepted as a professional engineer and you've already been sworn in. If that satisfies the board, we can have you start your testimony.
It does. You may proceed, Mr. Ali.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ali, if you could please just maybe briefly go through some of the changes to your plan and explain the changes to the board and its professionals.
Absolutely. I'm going to share the screen if you don't mind.
Go for it. Yep.
So what I have, can you see my screen now?
We can, yes.
All right, very good. I'm going to enlarge the area around the building so we all can see it. So what we have added to the plan or revised some of the elements here is that we added the AC unit, the additional AC unit, and that is will fit in, so will be the middle one, and the fencing around the units will be enclosed all the way around. So we'll add a note on the plan that others will be fenced and will meet the ordinance requirement. So that was one of the items, the additional AC unit. Right next to the, on the other side of the sidewalk here, we added one more 9x18 automobile charging station. So now we have two, and that would also meet the ordinance requirement. So that area has been revised here. So with that too, if you go to the front, we were asked to add some landscaping. So we have some shrubberies that all along the front of the building, along our frontage. So that's been also added to the plan. And then we revised the area in the back to indicate a 6 foot high white fenced area. So we selected white, but we'll leave it up to the board as far as the color. That area will still will be enclosed, and a gate will be provided. And it's about 254 square feet, and has the floor will be the weather-proof materials, or what we call it, the artificial materials. And the composite of that is basically artificial materials. The existing pavement will be removed, and the soil will be exposed. Will be put on top of that will be stone, clean stone, and then the artificial material on top of it. It's a typical of a play area for a dog, the dog play area, and that's commonly used throughout the industrial. In addition to that, we also revised the area of the. I'd like to move the screen.
Real quick, Mr. Ali, while you're going through the plan, can you just note which plan you're referring to for the record, and if there's any revision dates on there?
Yes, that is sheet 2 of 2, and the revision date is July 21st. Screen is here we go. So we also, I'm still on sheet, what you see on the screen at the top is sheet 1 of 1, the bottom is sheet 2 of 2. So I'm going to enlarge the area of sheet 2 of 2 in the area where we have revised the dumpster. We removed the existing dumpster, and within that area, after removal, we'll be adding additional landscaping along the common property line with existing residents. And the dumpster will be on the left side of the, here we go, will be the upper left corner, the existing dumpster used to be here, so the concrete pad and some of the outdoor structure in this area here will be removed, and will be additional landscaping, and that's what we see here in dark circles. That's the additional landscaping. Obviously preserving the existing tree in this area here. So the dumpster here is 16 by 16. It's very large enclosure that will contain trash, which is pretty much what will be stored there is general office trash as well as cardboard. No medical waste will be stored in this area, as was indicated in the prior testimony. So that's a very, very large enclosure here, 6 foot high, vinyl, white vinyl fence. Again, as far as the color, we'll leave it up to the board, but we selected white, and it's gonna have the gates. So that's the area that is being revised in addition to the fenced area, as well as the landscaping in the front, the AC unit, and the addition of the charge space. I believe that's all the changes that we have added. I'm looking at my notes. So I covered the AC, the 6 foot high fence, the trash enclosure area, and the as well as the landscaping. So that's pretty much it, that as far as the revision to the plan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ali. I guess at this point we could open it up to the board for questions.
Yeah, maybe a question first to Mr. Ball. Can you just remind us, were there any conditions that got carried over from the prior hearing the board has already requested?
There were a couple possible conditions that weren't formally confirmed yet, but the ones we were potentially discussing were first hours of operation, whether they would be limited from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays. I don't believe we specifically addressed weekends yet. And additionally, the other condition was that there would be no overnight boarding of animals. So again, those were both contemplated, not formally confirmed, which we would need to finalize tonight.
Okay.
If I can, while we're on the topic, we 100% agree that there will be no overnight boarding of animals. That's not part of this operation. So if that's a condition, we accept it. As far as the hours of operation, we had it 8 to 8 during the weekends. I'm sorry, the weekdays, and 8 to 2 p.m. Initially during the weekends. So if the board is okay with those, that's what we're limited to doing already. And we'll accept those conditions.
We'll certainly accept the no overnight boarding. I don't know if any board members have any position on the hours of operation or would like to hear any further testimony. To be honest with you, I don't have a point of reference for that, either with respect to a comparable medical facility or even the current occupants. So I would just offer that comment. But we can hold that. We can come back to it if no one wants to jump on that just yet.
I have a question here
Sure, Mr. Miller.
regarding the name. The name of the facility is the Animal Hospital, and I understand from the word hospital more than services, more than. Could it be changed into outpatient hospital, or could we add the word outpatient here somewhere?
Well, I think the issue is, has to do, number one, with signage is, we're trying not to add too many words to the existing sign, which is already a large sign. But I think they could explain, the doctors are able to explain why we're calling it a hospital. And I'll let you, provide some information on that and the services that you provide, again, just for clarity.
Yeah, in our industry, I think the two names that are debated upon are hospital versus clinic. To us, clinic denotes pure outpatient, but also likely no, surgical operations. Whereas in a hospital, you'd expect during those surgical operations to have the utmost top level of care as if you were in what you imagine to be a comparable human hospital. So to us, similar to Chatham Animal Hospital, Madison Animal Hospital, Summit Cat and Dog Hospital, like most of those places don't do overnight boarding, but the name hospital is kind of in our industry not as strict to denote any specific operation. But at the same time, it would be very clear based on our website and any information we put out, what our services provide.
Thank you.
Maybe before we offer any further board member questions, Chris or Tom, you have any?
Technical, if I can.
Yeah, jump in, Joe. I'll tell you what. Go
I
for it.
apologize, but I'm looking at the drawings that I have. They don't seem to have the same dates that he was referring to, and it said none of my drawings have the enclosure or any of that. I think he said the 23rd. My drawings say the 21st. If these are not the right drawings, will they be submitted to Chris?
I believe, I thought I heard him say the 21st, but I'll ask him.
Okay, but the
Mr.
ones
Ali.
I'm looking at with the 21st do not seem to show the enclosure on the, it may have said the 21st. My ears are not the best. But I'm looking at the area where the enclosure is supposed to be, and I don't see it, but that's, I could be blind too. Okay, if they are the right ones, then ignore me.
I could ask Mr. Ali to clarify, or maybe even Mr. Nicola, just to make sure that you have a copy of the plans. I don't know if you have a copy as well, but I know they were submitted, and I have a copy of the cover letter.
Just for those engineering
I just want to
drawings
make sure we have the
submitted?
right ones on file, Chris.
Yes, we do have the revised plans that were
Fine,
submitted.
that's it, then I'm done.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Steiner. All right. Sorry. Let's allow Mr. Dow or Mr. Variance to comment. Chris, anything you want to comment on before we let the rest of the board offer questions?
Well, there are a couple of things. The limit of paving, I know we discussed that briefly before. Is it just the area to the north of the building from the entrance on Chapel Street to where the freezer location is? Or is there anything else going to be paved?
No, that is the area.
Okay, and the rest of the parking lot will be restriped, and whatever signage, whether there's arrows or whatever in the parking lot, will be replaced or updated.
Will be
Is that correct?
updated, yes.
Okay. The lighting, some of the comments that we made were about the pet enclosure and the trash enclosure. Is going to be any additional lighting for those areas?
No, what we have on site is pretty adequate, and will not be any additional lights.
Okay, and I don't recall, I apologize, from our last meeting, were you going to have those, or is that lighting on timers currently, or is it contemplated that it will be? Generally, what the board likes to see is that the lighting is either dimmed or turned off an hour after close of business.
I believe we agreed to that, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we agreed to that as well.
Okay, good. I think that was pretty much the majority of my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dower, is it customary for these types of applications to have a lighting plan submitted? I only think about this because of the proximity of the property to some residential parcels.
Normally there is, but that's in general when there's a change in the lighting, which they're not proposing.
Okay.
So I would just say that if they were to contemplate changing over to LED lighting, that does change a lot. So they would need to submit a lighting plan to the city.
Okay. All right. So we'll just going to keep an ear out if there's any public testimony expressing concern for the existing lighting, then it may be appropriate for a lighting plan to be submitted. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dower. Tom, anything from you?
I did have a few quick site plan questions for Mr. Ali. So one had to do with recognizing that you've relocated the dumpsters somewhat further from the adjacent residence, whether or not it should be located even further away from the adjacent residential properties, and if that was feasible, or is it in the best location as proposed?
The way we're seeing it right now, this is the best location. This is the best you get out there. If you see an area that will be more appropriate, we'll listen and we'll definitely modify the plans to indicate that. But what I have on the plans based on my site visit and the surrounding, that is the best location.
All right, so I guess it would be up to the board. On the one hand, it's about 5 feet away from the nearest residential property. On the other hand, it's a corner lot. So if you were to relocate it, it might be more visible, meaning the dumpster enclosure.
If I might just chime in real quickly, we did explore and we moved it around a couple of times to see if there was a better option. At one point in time, if you look at the entrance off of Chapel Street, if you go straight forward into those 2 parking spaces, we explored that, but then that puts it right on top of the other property behind it. So we figured since it was already in this location, we could try to improve it slightly so not to, cause any additional problems anywhere else on the site. Like you mentioned, it's a corner site. It's a little difficult, but we measured, and I think this is when we did the measurements, gave us the biggest buffer from all of the different residential structures that are surrounding it in this particular area. But we did explore a couple of different sites, and we settled on this one because it actually, in our opinion, is the furthest from all of the different residential properties.
All right, thank you. Regarding the landscaping, appreciate you guys adding some foundation plantings. We were wondering whether or not there should be some additional plantings along the southerly edge of the parking area to screen it a bit from, I guess, as can be viewed from Springfield Avenue. Is that something that can be done? I think just grass is proposed there at the moment.
So you're referring to this area here and this area?
We can't see the map at the moment. Could you get it up? That might help.
And maybe Mr. LaPerry, there was a comment in the amended zoning officer memo to call for a landscaping plan that we would just condition the application on a submission and review of a landscaping plan to include considerations, such as this.
Yes, and I think at the last hearing, I believe so, we agreed that we would work with the city forester to try to come up with an acceptable plan. And I think the applicants also testified that, this being a new business and somewhat of a new, at least modified, updated, cleaned up structure, their goal and desire is to make it look as attractive as possible so that it's an inviting, and welcoming facility. So it's their intent to make this look nice. And I think we will agree to work with the city forester to come up with a plan.
Maybe Mr. Burns, if you can just call out this one example, just so it's included in the record, this could serve as an example for the applicant to submit a holistic landscaping plan back to the city forester.
I think that would be sufficient and leave it to him.
Wonderful.
And the final comment, and I think this remains an outstanding issue based on what I've heard so far, that given the nature of the use, that animals entering or exiting the building sometimes need to relieve themselves, and whether or not there should be a designated space near the primary entrance, or if what's proposed is sufficient for that purpose. Can they just walk around the block, and is that good enough?
Yeah. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Can hear you. Yep.
Okay. I think he froze. I wasn't sure if I froze.
No, you're good.
I believe Mr. Ali touched upon it, is that white enclosed enclosure, which is the exercise area where he's circling right now. We will have an exterior entrance for the customers, patrons to use to relieve their dogs before they enter, as requested by, I believe it was the zoning officer's review letter. So we will comply with that as well. And I think that will satisfy that concern.
And then I think just as to that condition, though, Mr. LaPerry, there's a number of different elements that the zoning officer calls out regarding the provision of waste bags and a trash can. So I would just ask Andy that you include all that in the condition.
And we can address that too. We intend to get there
Okay.
when Dr. Lyons will address that.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. We may have lost Tom. He's probably restarting his machine here, but any questions from members of the board? Any further questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one of
Yep,
the things
sure.
also, they should have some type of a maintenance plan for that area where the dogs are using outside the building, whether or not that's, I don't know if it's going to be hosed down or how they would handle that. And that's probably
We're
a
going, we'll
recommendation.
address that.
Okay, good.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry, I didn't hear that. What was that answer?
Sorry, I just said that we will definitely address that.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, any questions from members of the board regarding the engineer's testimony? And understanding we're going to hear from an architect, a traffic professional, and a planner as well. Okay, not hearing any questions for you, Mr. Ali, from the board. We'll offer as well at this time the public, the interested public, the opportunity to comment. If you are with us here for this application and interested in commenting, you'll want to press the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. To be recognized, we'll then elevate you to be a panelist, and you may ask a question. Again, only questions for this particular witness, and no comment at this time. There'll be an opportunity for that at the conclusion of the hearing. Chris, I don't see any activity.
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't see any hands raised, and there's no phone numbers dialing in.
Okay, all right, very well. Mr. LaPerry, if you'd like to move to your next witness, you may.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to call Greg Clark, the project architect. Mr. Clark, you were previously qualified as an expert, and you were sworn under oath. So that's going to continue. And I just ask if you would just go forward, please, and explain to the board some of the changes that you have made to your plan.
Yes, of course. Yes. And thank you again, board members and board professionals, for the opportunity to have a special meeting like this. Basically, we're addressing a couple of the main issues raised by the planner. First of which would be the exterior roof pitch, which I believe at the very beginning of the meeting was addressed, that the actual code does in fact require at least a 4-on-12. So after exhaustive research of your codes, I now know them inside out. I could not find anything referring to the 6-on-12. So we were kind of holding to what I proposed on the submitted drawings, which are the drawings dated, I believe, July 20th, that we resubmitted, that show a roof pitch on sheet A2 of 4.5-on-12, which is what we intend to do. Now I'm going to share the screen here so I can actually put a drawing in front of you.
Mr. Clark, just when you get the drawing up, if you could just please identify it so we know what we're dealing with.
Absolutely. We are dealing with the resubmitted drawing A2, which is dated July 20th, 2021. What I have done in this particular exhibit, which is going to have to be, I guess, admitted as an additional exhibit because I do have a change on the front. But for the purposes of my previous point, I just wanted to illustrate that the center second level portion is in fact now a 4.5-on-12 roof pitch that is clad with traditional dimensional fiberglass asphalt shingles. Whereas before, I believe the original drawing that was submitted at the last meeting, I believe we had a standing seam metal roof. We wanted to bring the overall roof more into context with the neighborhood, which exhibits primarily the traditional asphalt fiberglass shingles, which are basically the 3-tab GAF shingles that everyone's familiar with. So the existing roof on the building, which is a hip roof, I'm kind of circling the area on the left and the right of the south elevation. Those will also be reclad in the same matching shingles that the intent of the second level would also be. So bringing everything into compliance. with the zone. And I'll talk about that in a second as far as Chapter 35 is concerned.
Before you proceed, Mr. Clark, we just want to recognize this revised exhibit as A4. And
A4.
we'll want that submitted to Mr. Nicola just for the record when you have the opportunity.
Understood.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll write that down. And while we're on the exhibits, A1 will need to be renamed as well, because I do have an update on that regarding the front entry exit. So do we want to call that A5?
Sounds good to you, Chris?
I would just mark the whole submittal as A4 if the board's comfortable with that.
Sure, works for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, before I get into the exterior roof enclosure, I want to first get back to the plan on sheet A1, which is actually the exhibit A4. Basically, there was the zoning officer had recommended that we relabel this front entry, the comfort room. I think I have it labeled as an exit. It is both an entry and an exit, so it will serve the function of having patients come in to bring their pets in for euthanization in that particular entrance, and it will also serve as a further compliance to the ordinance requiring a prominent frontal exit and entry for the building. So with that label, it's more than a label, as I'll get into in a second, but we actually memorialize that on the plan here with a nomenclature that says comfort room entry exit. So that will serve the purpose both as an emergency exit, which is required by code, and also as an entry exit by, as I said before, by patients bringing their pets in for euthanization. So they have a private entry for grieving purposes, essentially. Now, in further definition of that comfort room entry exit, we actually, and I'm going to refer back to sheet A2 of the new exhibit A4. If we look at the south elevation, the Springfield Street elevation, we propose to have a roof overhang that will be a matching pitch metal standing seam roof. We use the metal standing seam as just to accentuate the the entry, just to kind of make it stand apart a bit from the vastness of the rest of the roof, which are clad with shingles. We intend to support it with two square fiberglass columns, actually probably PVC clad columns, to match the siding. And that will further accentuate that front entry and and bring it further into the compliance with Chapter 35, specifically with section, I believe it's 35-14.5, which states that you need to have a prominent entry and exit for the frontal street-bound elevations. So you can also see it from the side. If I refer to the east elevation here, we're looking at it from the Chapel Street end, and we can see it proceeds or projects out 5'8" from the building is what the center line of the column would be. And again, we have a hip roof that's visible, from the side. Also from the other side too. If you go to the west elevation, you'll see it there. So with that, we, that's how we wanted to address getting ourselves further into compliance with the ordinance by accentuating that front entry. Now there was some, they wanted us to demonstrate, and I mean the planner specifically wanted us to demonstrate how we are bringing the project further into compliance with that zone as far as architectural details and architectural massing. And what I would say is that dealing with the existing conditions as we are, we have an existing single-story building that we are bringing actually into further compliance just by virtue of adding the second level. That is item C4 in section 1313 in Chapter 35, which says that all new buildings and any existing buildings that are expanded shall contain at least 2 stories above grade. So that, I think, is the primary element that we are putting forth to bring the building further into compliance with Chapter 35. So with that, essentially that covers the updates in this particular Exhibit A4, which I'll be happy to submit. That's it. I'll open myself up to questions from the board and to the public.
Okay. Mr. LaPerry, anything else you'd like to add before we proceed to the board professionals?
Oh, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dower, anything you'd care to just to ask?
I have no comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Behrens?
One question, and sorry if I missed it. Is there a basement, Mr. Clark?
There is no basement.
No,
It's a
okay.
slab on grade construction.
That was my only question. Thank you.
No
Okay.
problem.
Questions from the board for the architect, Mr. Clark? Okay. I just had a few that caught my eye here. And again, apologies if these are going to get addressed perhaps by the planner. The visually prominent entrance, the zoning officer had mentioned that the applicant should provide testimony to the board's satisfaction as to how and why a variance should be granted for not providing a required visually prominent entrance. Are we treating the comfort entrance as visually prominent?
Yeah, so real quick, I believe, and I'll let Mr. Clark testify to that, but I believe what we have added eliminates the need for that variance due to the permanent exterior structure, overhang. But Mr. Clark, if maybe you could just elaborate on that a little bit so that it's perfectly clear, what exactly is going to be in that area.
Yes, that was actually designed to eliminate that particular variance. Without getting into, further, detail as far as, a vestibule enclosure, things of that nature, which I don't think would be needed. I think that flat south elevation does benefit from the porch, not porch, but the porch enclosure, which extends the width of the sidewalk and that patio, as did the canvas awning that previously existed there. We actually, believe it or not, brought it further into compliance in one other respect, in that we brought it back inside the property line, whereas the original canopy extended beyond the property line. I'm not sure if that was approved or whether they had just done it in the past, but I guess technically calling that a permanent structure, this would yet bring us further into compliance as far as the bulk zoning would be concerned. But yes, to answer your question, that the front overhang was designed to provide a visually prominent entry, thus sidestepping the need for that particular variance. Same with the 4-on-12 pitch, or the 4.5-on-12 pitch, that was designed also to eliminate the need for that particular variance request.
Okay. And then Ms. LaPerry, signage will be addressed with the planner?
Yes, it will be. It's the same plan, but our planner will discuss it a little further.
Okay. There was a comment also from the zoning officer around the additional AC condenser, a very minor comment about the one additional fence panel being installed to match the existing fence screening. Is that at all objectionable?
No, I believe Mr. Ali mentioned it briefly. I believe what's there now is a shrub in between the two, and when the shrub is removed to put the new unit, it'll just be continued with the fence, so it'll be one solid fencing unit. So we are going to comply with that condition, or that issue as well.
Okay, wonderful. All right, any other questions from the board?
I do have one. Looking at the zoning officer's report, Mr. Clark, I wonder if you can comment on her comment that the application, the architectural elevations, the revised one, should show all elements of each facade. She mentioned signing. I'm not sure what else she had in mind there, but do you feel that these revised elevations accurately show all elements of each facade?
You mentioned signage?
Well, she did. She did. I mean, I'll just read it. The applicant should clarify if the revised architectural elevations are intended to substitute for the elevations originally submitted. For example, the revised elevations do not show the proposed signage. Should the application be approved, the architectural elevations must accurately show all elements of each facade. So I'm just wondering if you feel that all elements are shown.
With the exception of the signage, yes, it is extremely accurate. We conducted a field measure of the existing building. So the building itself is drawn accurately, as are the proposed additions. Yes, you're correct. There is no signage on it. And if the board requires it, we can add it to the elevations for resubmission.
I think she's asking for it, so I think we should require it.
Understood.
Okay.
All right, any other questions from members of the board?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Ms. Schwartzstein.
The siding is going to be vinyl siding, is that correct?
That's what's proposed, correct. Well, white vinyl siding, a 6-inch lap siding that would it's basically a step above the 4.5 inch, which is a residential dimension. So this will appear more as a colonial, more accurate colonial dimension for it. But yes, vinyl is the proposed material.
And it's going to be white.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, barring any further questions from the board, we'll open it to the public to ask questions of the architect. Again, only questions at this time. As we're in a webinar format, you'll need to press the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen to be recognized, and then we'll welcome you to ask a question of the architect. All right, hearing and seeing no interest, at least for you, Mr. Clark, at the moment. You've made it through unscathed. Mr. LaPerry, we can move on to your next witness.
Thank you very much. As I indicated, in light of the concerns that were raised at the prior hearing, the applicants retained the services of Mr. Frank Miskovich, who is a professional engineer, and he's going to opine on the traffic and parking. He has not been sworn in because he's a new witness. So if you'd like to swear him in, we can ask him for his credentials to be accepted by the board.
Absolutely. If you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
It's Frank Miskovich, spelled M-I-S-K-O-V as in Victor, I-C-H.
Thank you. And would you briefly describe your background, experience, and name 3 boards you've appeared before aside from Summit?
Okay, sure. I may not have been in Summit for quite a number of years, but I'm licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. By way of education, I have a bachelor's in civil engineering from Newark College of Engineering and a master's in civil engineering from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I have approximately 50 years of experience in the area of transportation, traffic, and highway design, as well as parking. I had served as the Middlesex County traffic engineer in the late 70s through the 1980s. I was vice president of transportation to 2 large Central Jersey firms. And in 2013, I went into my own practice. I represented a number of planning and zoning boards throughout the state, as well as testifying before those zoning boards and planning boards. Currently served as the Jackson Township Zoning Board traffic engineer. Recently, I was the Borough of Fairlawn Zoning Board traffic engineer. I've been testified and accepted as an expert witness in Superior Court in New Jersey.
Right. Any questions from the board, or would you like to accept his credentials at this point?
I think halfway through he was just showing off, but yes, we'll accept your credentials.
I was waiting for the cue to cut me.
No, you did a good job. Quite a career you've had so far. So show us how it's done.
Thank you, Mr. Miskovich. If you could please just we submitted a parking and traffic and parking statement to the board. If you could just take us through what went into, I guess, your preparation of that document, and then some of the conclusions that you've reached.
Sure. The report you're referring to was dated July 29, 2021. And basically, it's a qualitative assessment of the traffic and the parking impacts that I think are associated with this change of use. And in preparing that report, I visited the site. I reviewed the site plan and the architectural plans that have been submitted to the board. I've discussed the operations with the applicant regarding hours of operation, staffing, whether animals will be boarded or not, et cetera. And talked about deliveries to the site, which primarily are going to be small type trucks, FedEx, UPS, et cetera. So it's not a large traffic generator as far as large trucks. When you're looking at a change of use, in my opinion, you want to look at what that change of use is going to have as far as the impacts on traffic generation and parking. And to make that assessment, I refer to a document that's published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. It's their trip generation manual. It's the 10th edition, which is the current edition. And that manual contains data regarding different types of land use as far as traffic generation, peak hours, daily traffic, et cetera. And that's accepted by counties in the state of New Jersey Department of Transportation, and engineers, both private and public sector, use that as a reference. in looking at these uses, we have a restaurant use, which is a permitted use in the zone and currently occupies the site. So I looked at that type of restaurant, which I would think is covered under their category, high turnover, sit down, family type restaurant. I then looked at the IT. They have a land use code that deals with animal hospital veterinary clinics. So we had data for both these type of uses, and I made the comparison, looking at peak hours and well as daily weekday and daily weekend type traffic. And when I do that comparison, I see that the current or the proposed use would generate about 12 peak hour trips. And that's a combination of inbound and outbound. So it's total 12 movements at these two driveways. Daily traffic's in the range of 66 vehicles a day in or out. Compared to a restaurant use, current size that is on that site, you're looking at 30 to 43 peak hour trips, weekday evening and Saturday. But I think what's more telling in the weekends that you might be looking at 390 trips on a weekday, 487 on a Saturday. So by way of comparison, this particular use as far as daily traffic is running about 15 to 20% of what a restaurant use could generate. So from a traffic planning perspective, I do not see the change in use as being a major traffic generator or having a significant impact on traffic in the area. And that is also premised on the fact that we have two driveways that are serving this facility. So those movements are separated, are dispersed between the two driveways. Matter of fact, the IT has a publication that talks about transportation impacts of site development, and they look at 100 peak hour trips as having an impact on traffic. Anything less does not have a significant impact. Those numbers are also used by the New Jersey Department of Transportation. So as far as traffic generations, I think we're on the lower end of the spectrum. Excuse me. And while we're talking about the driveway, I just want to point out right now, there are no left turns out of the driveway onto Chapel Street. And obviously the one on Springfield is a right turn only. There's no changes proposed to those restrictions. So the existing movements in and out of those driveways will remain unchanged. When I looked at the parking, I looked at the borough's code as far as the parking requirements. And what I found was a restaurant use for the 2,000 plus square feet that currently is on the property, you would require 40 parking spaces. Physically, there's 30 on site now. So the current use really does not meet the township parking requirement. Excuse me, city parking requirement. When I look at a medical dental facility, which is the closest thing in your ordinance to this particular facility, and based on the expanded use with the 3,000 plus square feet, we need 21 parking spaces. The revised plan is now 26 parking spaces proposed, so we exceed the parking requirements of the city. So comparing this use to the restaurant use, this is in more compliance with the city parking requirements. So given that, my qualitative assessment is the fact that we have less traffic generation from this proposed use. We have less of a parking impact. In fact, we have more parking than the city requires. So in that respect, I feel that the adjacent street system can accommodate the site traffic, and I do not think parking is going to be an issue with the proposed facility. And
Okay,
Mr. Questions or any clarification for the board or the public? Yes?
Mr. LaPerry, did you have
Oh, no,
question or comment? Sorry.
It sounded great to me, so I'll just allow the board to ask any questions that they may have.
All right. Mr. Dower, anything you care to comment on?
No, the memo really followed all his standard traffic recommendations, and I agree with his conclusions that there's going to be less traffic with this proposed use.
Okay. Mr. Berenger here. Any comment you'd like to provide to the traffic engineer's testimony?
No questions. I generally concur with Mr. Dow.
Okay, always a safe bet. Any questions from members of the board? No? Okay. All All right, usually traffic's a hot topic, but let's see, any members of the public care to opine, ask a question here rather of Mr. Miskovitz? Again, you'll want to raise your hand, push the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen, or press *9 if you've dialed in. This is an opportunity for questions regarding traffic. Okay, hearing and seeing none.
I am.
Oh.
I'm catching up because I'm not 100% sure. Is Chapel Street a two-way street or a one-way?
It's a two-way street, but the side of the street that this facility is on is marked for no parking. So,
and there is a no left turn sign as you leave one of the driveways, if I'm correct.
right, the driveway.
What's that, under what statute is that, and how do we make that permanent?
Well, it would be under Title 39. I don't know if the city ordinance has that stipulated as a no left turn from the driveway. I know it's signed that way. So if it is not part of the city ordinance and to be enforceable, the council would have to adopt Title 39 designating that driveway at Chapel Street as a right turn only or no left turn out. But I did not research what the particular ordinance requirement is, whether that's in there or not.
I think that's usually done at the request of the property owner when something like this comes up. And I don't know whether or not the restaurant did, or it was just something to be nice to the neighbors, will prevent people from turning left.
Yeah, I don't know.
We've seen that done before. So I don't know whether or not we think it's something that with the reduced traffic load, we need to prevent the left turn and maybe allow people to go out and turn left. Not at all sure how to approach this one.
My thought process would be since it is a lower traffic generator, and for this particular use, because if we had a higher intense use, let's say if a restaurant were to come back, you may want to revisit that. But the board's suggestion might be if they do not think that or allowing left turns out of this driveway would be a particular problem, it would be a condition on researching what the ordinance has. If the ordinance does not have this as a particular specific requirement prohibiting that, then the sign can come down. If there were statutory requirements prohibiting that, then council would have to take action whether to eliminate that or keep it. I believe the applicant is fine either way. But that's something I think could be researched in the condition of approval, or really leave it up to the board.
So I think we heard from Mr. Steiner that he'd like to see the sign or that condition, no left turn condition, maintained. Mr. Steiner, is that a fair characterization of your opinion?
Actually, it is, but I actually would love to know what the police department thought about it, if they feel that it's necessary to have it or not.
Okay. Is
And of
anyone
course, they didn't bring it up.
Right. Yeah. Any other member of the board feel strongly about a need to turn left at that exit?
I'd like to be a restriction. I'm just looking at a map right now, and you come up Chapel, it might create some problems with people looking to get back to Broad Street. You might have traffic backing up onto Chapel.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I've pulled out of that parking lot a lot, and I think left turns there coming out of the parking lot could be a problem. Maybe it's less of a problem with this kind of facility, but I could see why they had that sign there. I definitely can see.
So, Mr. Ball, how do we confirm the validity of that condition, or encourage, if not compel, the applicant to ensure that the no left turn continues?
So as noted, that is a decision for the city governing body on if it doesn't currently exist. It's up to them on whether they would take Title 39 jurisdiction over that portion of the road and require the sign be there. And it would require a review of the existing ordinances and whether that's already been done in the past to see whether that sign is formally, subject to enforcement restrictions, or if it's just there informally and doesn't really have any teeth. So I think the suggestion would be, if the board wants to ensure that that sign remains, that the applicants would confer with the police department and potentially the city to determine whether that sign is subject to Title 39. And if it's not, make that request to the governing body.
That'd be
If it's,
acceptable, Mr. LaPerry?
if it's easier, we could just agree to keep it up. Would that just resolve the issue?
No, but it's not enforceable. And if we want it enforceable, we want to make sure that the applicants here take the actions necessary to make sure that the town reviews it and gets the ordinance in place if it is not currently in place.
We can do that as well. We can agree to that.
Understanding you can't compel the action of the governing body, but your good faith efforts would be appreciated.
Understood. And we'll take the efforts necessary to see if we can get that accomplished for you.
Can I ask a clarification on this left-hand turn issue?
Please.
Okay, so are we saying there's no left-hand turn onto Springfield and there's no left-hand turn onto Chapel? Is that what
If I may, the discussion was the no left turn onto Chapel.
Okay.
Springfield is one way towards the intersection, so you can make the left. It's a sign for no right turn, so that's enforcing the one-way movement.
Okay, so it's just the Chapel.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because
You're welcome.
coming out of that, across the street is the car wash, and you can take a left coming out of the car wash, so. Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions from members of the board? Okay, then Mr. LaPerry, we can move to your next witness.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we get to our planner, I just want to ask Mr. or Dr. Lyons to testify one more time, just provide some clarity as to how they intend to use that outdoor area that is, I guess, near the front entrance, and just to give a better explanation so that everybody's clear on exactly what's going to be taking place in that little enclosure. So without further ado, Mr. or Doctors Richard and Evan Lyons.
Thank you. So this relief area, the outdoor enclosed area, was originally meant for pets that are staying for the day for a procedure to be able to use the bathroom before, anesthesia or like during an appointment. The zoning officer recommended that we allow clients, customers that are showing up to use it as well. So we're agreeing to that. Since that does, mean there's more volume in that area, we have researched a biodegradable but sufficiently strong disinfectant that would be used twice daily in that area to make sure it's clean, it's sanitary, it eliminates odor, as well as the turf materials that they use for these areas eliminate odor and bacteria as well. Since daycares use these, some veterinary facilities use these, so it's very common. And the goal is always, of course, sanitation and odor control.
As far as any solid waste that'll be in that area, how do you plan to take care of the cleaning and disposal of that?
So as the zoning officer mentioned, we would definitely have bags available for any solid waste. We also researched the paw pail, which is basically a diaper genie for dog solid waste. So the benefit of that is we can actually seal the waste instead of just a trash can or something like that to even further eliminate odor, both at that spot and then when it's disposed of as well.
Can I just add one more thing as well?
Yes, please.
So Ms. Anderson had also requested, not officially in the document that was provided, but in an email with that document, that the doctor should be able to testify as to their experience with this issue from where they work now. And I just want to emphasize that we don't anticipate this being used very frequently. Seldom, at least in our experience, do pet owners use it very frequently. And most of the time when we do use it, it's actually to collect a sample, which would pretty much eliminate the issue of disposal of waste since we're submitting it to the laboratory for analysis. So the actual impact and usage of this area is pretty minimal in our opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all the questions we have, or I have for the applicants as far as the operations. I think everything else was addressed at the prior hearing, but I'm sure, they're available if there's any other questions by the board or professionals.
Now, I would just ask Andy, this is a condition we're crafting, is it not? How do we treat this operational matter?
It could be if you want it specifically addressed. Obviously, they're bound by the testimony that they will have those, odor eliminating materials and supplies in place. But if you wanted a specific condition, to be sure it's reflected in the resolution, we could basically reiterate that testimony as a condition.
I only think about the common turn of phrase here in land use about infringing upon light, air, space, and I suppose we should add odor as well. So if we feel like this is a particularly compelling issue, an issue of concern for neighbors that may not be able to join tonight, I would be willing to entertain a condition that is has a little more teeth to it, no pun intended. But I don't know how the rest of the board here feels about that. I don't need to provide some onerous, unnecessary condition for the applicant. Who's a stickler over odor here? Mr. Steiner?
I think they're going to have it there. That we can, mandate. Whether or not they're going to use it or not is actually an issue for the Board of Health. That if indeed, for some reason, they go on vacation and current staff that doesn't use it properly, and neighbors complain about an odor, I'm just making it up as we go, where, it's a Board of Health issue as far as enforcement is concerned.
I mean, I don't know if this is analogous, when we have a potential water intrusion issue for cases, we retain jurisdiction for 2 years afterwards. I don't know if we have wafting jurisdiction for 2 years or whatever, but maybe something analogous.
Yeah, if I may, we understand, certainly we understand, what you're trying to achieve. And the same with the landscaping is Doctors Lyons are trying to open up a new business. This is sort of next to the front entrance. They're going to do everything that they can to make sure that, there's no odor issues or anything like that, so that it's a very friendly and inviting situation. But I believe Mr. Steiner is correct, it would become a Department of Health issue. And certainly, I guess we've testified that they're going to be applying these chemicals twice a day and keeping it clean and fresh and all of those things. So I suppose if there was a clear violation of that, we would be in violation of the approval. I don't know how much more we can condition it, but certainly we're open to, providing the assurances necessary to let you know that, we have every intent to make sure that this is a clean, friendly, and sanitary environment.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if we need to retain wafting jurisdiction, but I like the idea, Mr. Mullen. So kudos to you. Yeah, I don't feel necessarily compelled to condition this strongly unless anyone else does. I think the Board of Health would be happy to jump on this if a prospective violation did occur, and it would behoove the applicants to act expeditiously to address anything. So,
yeah, I don't see a need for a condition here either. I think they've testified, committed to have the supplies and keeping it clean, and it's in their interest running a business to keep it clean and odor free. And if there are complaints, the city will deal with them. I don't think we need any more of a condition than that.
Okay. On this subject then, Mr. Dower, Mr. Behrens, do you care to weigh in on this? No, Mr. Dower's passing. Tom, no, thank you. All right. Any members of the public care to, we'll offer you an opportunity to ask a question of the applicants on this particular subject. You'll need to press the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen to again ask a question. You'll have the ability to provide your opinion on the application at the conclusion of the hearing. Chris, I don't see any movement.
Neither do I, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, Mr. LePerry, we may continue. Thank you for that testimony.
Thank you. And we would like to now call our final witness, Mr. Frank Antisel of Accurate Engineering. He's a professional planner. Mr. Anticel will need to be sworn.
And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Sure, it's Frank, and the last name is Antisell, Antisell.
Thank you. And would you briefly describe your background, experience, and 3 boards you appeared before aside from Summit?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Widener University. I have a master's degree from Stevens Institute of Technology. I've been practicing as both a licensed professional engineer and a professional planner in the state of New Jersey for the past 30 years. And I've appeared before numerous boards. The 3 most recent ones are the City of Linden, the City of New Brunswick, and the Township of North Brunswick. And I've testified as both a planner and an engineer in front of those boards.
Thank you. Any questions from the board, or would we like to accept his credentials?
No questions. Welcome to Union County. Sounds like you've done some time in Middlesex, so we'll welcome you here.
Yep. Thank you. Actually, I believe I did appear in Summit, but it was probably about 20 or 25 years ago. So it's been a while.
Well, you're welcome to continue. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Mr. Anticel, you prepared a report in support of this application. If you could just briefly provide us with, I guess, an overview of the report and maybe focus on some of the variance relief that the applicant is seeking.
Sure. And just briefly, I know the owner and operator has explained the day-to-day operation of the proposed use, and our site engineer, architect, and traffic engineer have explained the existing site conditions and the proposed changes to the site. So I'm not going to repeat those, but if anybody has any questions, I can go into detail on those, after I'm done with my testimony. The property is located in the neighborhood business district. According to the ordinance, the purpose of the neighborhood business district is the primary function of this zone is to offer a mix of residential uses and convenient commercial services that are compatible with nearby residential neighborhood and minimize impacts of such development on adjacent residential areas. The commercial uses are relatively small in scale and are related to the day-to-day needs of the nearby residences. Buildings often contain a mix of street-level commercial and residential on the upper floors. The neighborhood business district has 11 supplementary requirements. When you look at all these requirements, we actually are in compliance with all 11 of them, except for one, which is the trash disposal area, which our engineers talked about. And we've done our best to move the trash disposal area so that we are more in compliant with the requirements. We've provided additional landscaping around the trash enclosure. And the board should note that there's going to be a significant change in the usage of that trash enclosure. You're going from an existing restaurant use that had produced food waste, and now we're a proposed veterinary use that will produce office and cardboard waste. So, as far as odors go, I think the trash enclosure will definitely have a less odor emanating from it. In addition, your supplementary requirement 4 asks that we have 2-story buildings above grade, and we are adding the 2nd-story addition so that we're further complying with requirement number 4 of the supplementary conditions. And when you look at your ordinance, neither veterinary hospital or veterinary services are defined in the ordinance. So we took a look at the ordinance, and it appears that neither the veterinary hospital nor the veterinary services are permitted in any zones in the city. So therefore, we're here for a use variance. And when you look at the bulk standards of the neighborhood business district, as our engineer has described, we comply with all of the bulk standards of your ordinance. So the building and all the bulk standards are in compliance. When you look at the parking, we are providing 28 parking spaces. We are required to have 21. So we've actually exceeding the parking requirement by 7 parking spaces. When you look at the loading space, there was a waiver will be required for not providing a loading space for the facility. And the waiver was previously granted for the existing restaurant that was there. So we're requesting to use the same loading space that was there. And when you look at this use, we're looking at having deliveries that are made by the US Postal System, UPS, and FedEx. Most of those deliveries result in a vehicle pulling up in the parking lot, unloading the delivery, and the delivery vehicle is in the parking lot for less than 5 minutes. So we believe the existing 12-foot by 30-foot loading space will adequately allow for these types of deliveries. When you look at the D1 use variance that's required, the MLUL requires that an applicant requesting a use variance demonstrate that both the positive and negative criteria are satisfied. As to the positive criteria, the applicant must provide testimony establishing special reasons for the board to grant the requested use variance, such as the promotion of one or more of the purposes of the MLUL found at 40:55D-2. In addition, the applicant must demonstrate that the variance requested will promote the general welfare because the site is particularly suited for the proposed use. As to the negative criteria, the applicant must demonstrate that the requested variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, referring specifically to the impact of the proposed variance on surrounding properties. When you look at this use variance and you look at the special reasons, we believe that you can approve this use variance based on special reasons: A, to encourage municipal action to guide appropriate use of or development; special reason C, to provide adequate light, air, and open space; special reason G, to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations; and also special reason H, to encourage the location of and design of transportation routes; and special reason I, to promote a desirable visual environment. When you look at the negative criteria, it is difficult to identify negatives with this application based on the testimony you've heard from our other professionals. When you look at traffic, as our traffic engineer has pointed out, this application will generate less traffic than the existing restaurant and a number of the other permitted uses in the zone. When you look at parking, we're providing sufficient parking in our lot. And one of the things that was brought up at the previous hearing by the neighbors was on-street parking is a problem in the area. We will not be contributing to that on-street parking problem as, again, we have sufficient parking in our parking lot. So in our opinion, the proposed project will present no substantial detriment to the public good. The applicant proposes an adaptive reuse of an existing building and property, which is highly visible on Springfield Avenue. And we believe the use is clearly appropriate for the proposed location, and the site can accommodate the deviations as shown on the plan. Therefore, there's no substantial detriment associated with the proposed veterinary hospital. When you look at the bulk variances, I believe we've eliminated all the bulk variances except for the sign variance. And the sign variance, all we're looking to do is replace the existing sign with one that's the same size. All we're changing is the name that's on the sign. So, with that, we need to show special reasons. And I think if you look at special reasons A, G, and I, those would definitely cover the changing of the sign. We don't see any substantial detriment for the sign variance. And the sign variance is important so that people know where to turn and where the use is located.
Thank you, Mr. Antisel. I think just to clarify your testimony with regard to the use variance, you testified that this proposed use does promote several purposes of the municipal land use law and is particularly suited for the intended.
Yes, I
I do.
Mr. LaPerry frozen or just?
I
Okay.
think he may have frozen, yes.
All right, I'll give him a moment to thaw here. Oh, give it another go, Mr. LaPerry.
I don't know what happened or where we left off, but I'm back. Mr. Anticello, did you finish your testimony?
Yes, I did. And, any questions I'm willing to entertain.
I just wanted to clarify, since I missed the end, and I don't know if you heard anything I said, but I just wanted to clarify that you did testify that the proposed use promotes several purposes of the municipal land use law and is particularly suited for the intended use?
Yes, I did.
And it's your opinion also that this is an upgrade over the prior use at this location?
Yes, it is. And it's definitely, a less intense use on the site.
And so it's your opinion then that this will have no substantial detriment to the zone plan or to the surrounding properties?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for Mr. Anticel.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dower, anything you care to comment on before we let Mr. Behrens loose?
No, I have no comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, Tom, here you go. This is your time to shine.
Try not to get too wild here, but I'll do my best. Just one point of clarification this is being somewhat nitpicky, has to do with the loading space. Mr. Anderson, you referenced a prior waiver that was granted for a 12 by 30 loading space. I think the one that's actually on the site plan is smaller than that. Can we get clarification maybe from Mr. Ali or somebody as to the actual size of the loading space?
Yeah.
Yes, we do have a drop-off area for small delivery trucks.
Right.
And it goes as a hatch area. If you want me to share the screen.
Well, just what size is the space? I believe it's smaller than the 12 by 30.
That one is 9 by 18.
Right, so that's
we
the
also,
proposed.
opposite, on the other side of that, we are showing the previous loading area that was granted back in the 90s. So that's also shown on the site plan.
Okay, maybe I could be mistaken. That's possible.
I was going to say that's the 12 by 30 area, Mr. Ali.
Yeah, that will be kind of like up the sheet from that 9 by 18 across the aisle, very much.
Okay, so I guess the board could accept that or not. I'll leave it to Andy whether or not that constitutes a new variance or.
And let me just clarify my understanding so I'm sure here. So the existing loading dock that has variance relief from the prior application, that's being maintained as it currently stands, and then there's an additional smaller loading dock that's being proposed?
Well, there's a loading space.
Loading space, rather.
Yes, there's the existing 12 by 30 loading space that is that was previously approved for the restaurant use, and that is remaining unchanged. In addition, we have a 9 by 18 drop-off area and sign. So we're helping the situation by adding an additional space.
So I think, and I'm just going to try and quickly pull up the provision of the code here. But I believe the requirement is that all loading spaces have to meet that the original size requirement. So if we're proposing an additional smaller one, technically the older variance for the existing loading space would run with the land, and an additional variance wouldn't be necessary for that. But as to the additional smaller one, that would technically implicate additional variance for relief, and I would recommend that the board just consider that as an additional variance request along with the remainder of the variances in this application.
Okay, we will consider it. Good catch.
All right, so moving along, so we have the one, I guess we're calling it a loading space variance. Again, I think it's more of a technicality than anything else. There's the sign variance where, I don't know if it was mentioned or not, but the proposed signs are essentially the same size and dimension as what exists, and that's on the two front faces of the building. And then we have the one significant variance is the D1 variance. Obviously, that's why we're before the zoning board. And the test here is whether or not the site is particularly suitable for the use. And I think there's a few ways to look at that to arrive to a conclusion for the board members. And one is whether or not the use and site comply in other respects with the city's code in terms of bulk requirements or otherwise. We've had some testimony about that. Again, there are only two other variances being sought. The second question would be, can the site accommodate the use with respect to the intensity, again, bulk requirements, traffic, et cetera. And then there's a question of whether or not the proposed use is a better alternative than some or all of the permitted uses. And just to ramble a few off, they include, once my screen unfreezes. Well, they include retail. Am I frozen?
No, you're good. Continue.
Oh, I'm good. I'm sorry. I saw some faces freeze. They include retail uses, personal service uses, restaurants and the like. So I think there is some argument to be made that this might be less intense than some of those uses, but I'll let the applicant make that argument. And then finally, with respect to the negative criteria, I'm not sure we touched on this too much, but there's the enhanced burden of proof for a D1 variance. And that is the test of whether or not the granting of the D1 variance is not inconsistent with the intent and purpose of the master plan and zoning ordinance. Now, bro.
I think you're okay. I think your audio is
Can
okay.
hear the audio.
Your video's choppy. Oh, I think you're back. Talk quickly.
Yeah, my internet's in and out. I apologize. Did you get any bit of what I just rambled about?
We did. I was going to punt it over to Mr. LaPerry to see if he concurs or wanted to add anything.
I don't disagree with his summary of the law. I think Mr. Anticel addressed those issues and provided the requisite proofs. If Mr. Anticel has anything else to add, I'll certainly allow him to do so. But I think he adequately addressed it, and I think he went through it. And we also have his report that is part of the record as well that also outlines it. But I'll ask Mr. Anticel if he thinks there's anything else that he needs to add.
Not off the top of my head, but if the board has any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Let's open it then to board questions. Any questions for the applicant's planner from members of the board? Oh, Ms. Toth, what do you got for us?
Oh, this is the unanswerable question I asked at the last time, and Mr. Andisel, the attorney, punted it over to you. I am troubled by the clear language of the statute saying no veterinary hospitals, and I am interested as to how that got into the statute. I mean, I have not gone looking at board minutes or at prior drafts or where this might have come from. But I'm particularly concerned about the potential precedental effect, because there's a plenty of other things that are specifically not allowed in neighborhood business zones. So how do we get over this language without opening ourselves up to something we really don't want down the road?
Sure.
If I could just jump in, I just wanted to clarify that it doesn't specifically say veterinary hospitals are not allowed. It just doesn't contain veterinary hospitals as a permitted use in the zone, or in fact, in any zone within the city.
Well, but it includes retail sales and services, which when you go to that definition excludes veterinary hospitals.
Yeah, I think it's a little nitpicky on how it's defined. my understanding of the ordinance is not a specifically prohibited area. And when they do include the retail, you are correct. It says that it is not included as one of those uses, but it still doesn't specifically prohibit it. It just does not allow that as a specifically permitted use, but no other zoning within your city permits it as a specifically permitted use. And I think the question they posed first time, which might be a little easier to clarify for Mr. Antisel, was, is it common to not have a specific use in a specific zone or in any zone in the township?
Yep, and yeah, I think you have a valid question about, and looking at this and having sat, I sit as a zoning board engineer in South Brunswick, and we've had a number of applications similar to this. And when you look at veterinary uses, there are all sorts of different veterinary uses. I mean, you have small veterinary service businesses like the one we're proposing, and you also have large-scale veterinary hospitals that have 24-hour service, have dog boarding and overnight stays. So you need to, one of the things that when you don't have a use that's anywhere in the ordinance, which we have here, it comes to the zoning board. And the one good thing about that use coming to the zoning board, it enables the zoning board to impose conditions on that use so that the board can limit what can and can't be on that site, which is what the board has done in this situation. The board here is posing conditions and limits on this applicant. There'll be no overnight boarding of dogs. This site will not be used as a dog daycare. We're not offering grooming. So that, you've heard what the day-to-day operations are by the doctors here, and there'll be no overnight boarding. By limiting and putting those conditions on the applicant, you're protecting the town from a use that would be obtrusive if it was a regional veterinary hospital that had overnight stays and offered 24-hour service.
Okay, thank you.
If I could chime in, just because I've been directly involved with the new ordinance and with this particular issue involving more broadly dog kennels, boarding uses, and veterinary services that was reviewed maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I think the crux of it had to do with the overnight and outdoor activities associated with animal type uses. So while veterinary uses are lumped in, I think on the one hand, if you were to, let's say, permit veterinary services as of right, you wouldn't necessarily be prohibiting overnight stays and the like. So I think maybe this is an issue the city has to look at a little bit further, but I think the real reason that they're not permitted as of right has to do with the overnight stays, the boarding, and again, the outdoor activities that might occur. So just my 2 cents.
I'm certain that Chris is scribbling copious notes here for our annual report to raise this question back to the governing body, as only they can opine upon why it was excluded. So,
correct, and the planning board.
Both may mention are not serving in the month of August, but anyways, that's just an aside here. Way to go, zoning board. Anyhow, any further questions for the planner from members of the board? All right. Then let's offer the public the opportunity to ask a question. This is I believe, Mr. LePerry, your last witness. Any questions from members of the public for the applicant's planner? If you'd like to ask a question, you'll need to press the raise hand feature or *9 on your telephone. All right, I don't see anything. Chris, you too?
No hands, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, Mr. LePerry, would you care to say anything in closing? And then we will offer the public one more opportunity to comment on the application, but I don't see any interest at the moment. But anything you'd like to say in conclusion?
Just very briefly, we feel as the applicants that we are providing an essential service to the township if approved. We think it's a vital use and it's important. we've really tried our best to address all of the concerns, and I think we've made significant changes to our plan to try to address the concerns of the board, its professionals, and even the comments of the public at the prior meeting. So, we are really doing everything that we could to try to make this, an application that is, acceptable to the board, and that'll be a real, home run for the city of Summit. And we really hope we've presented that to you and you feel the same way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. LaPerry. Thank you, Drs. Lyons. Let's offer the public, if you're here for this application and would like to share your comments in favor or in opposition to the application, we offer you that opportunity now to press the raise hand feature or *9 on your telephone. This is your opportunity to make a statement on the application. All right, hearing and seeing none. Chris, you concur? I don't see any hands raised.
I do not either, Mr. Chairman.
And we didn't receive any correspondence on the subject.
I did not see anything there either, and I've been checking the voicemails periodically as well.
Okay. All right, very well. Now to Mr. Ball. I have a lengthy list of conditions here before we enter our deliberations. What do you have noted?
I have quite a few, but before we do that, I do have one question about one of the conditions. The hours of operation, I know 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays was abundantly clear. I believe my notes indicate 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on weekends was what was being considered. Is that the correct hours, and is that acceptable to the applicants?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So with that, I have 6 conditions noted. First is our usual that the applicants will comply with the conditions noted in the board engineer's report. Number 2 is that the hours of operation are limited from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays and 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on weekends. The third condition is that there will be no overnight boarding of animals. Fourth is that the applicant shall submit a landscaping plan to the city forester for review and approval. Fifth is that the applicants will submit revised architectural elevations to include the proposed signage. And sixth, and the final condition I have noted, is that the applicant will confer with the city and the police department regarding the no left turn onto Chapel Street to determine if it's enforceable, and if not, then to request the application of Title 39 to ensure the validity of that no left turn sign.
The only other thing that I had, Andy, was, and this may not constitute a condition, it may just be captured in the engineer's letter, is the timing of the lights. What's the best way to treat that?
I believe, as noted, there was no change proposed to the lights, in which case the condition wasn't found to be necessary. But if there's some concern about that as a possibility.
Change was the hours of operation. Those lights are on till much later at night with takeout, and they're closing at 8. And I think the idea was to have them turned off about 9, 1 hour after they're done.
If we could, we'll comply with the 9 o'clock curfew for the lights.
Okay, so that's off at 9 or 1 hour after closing, which applies really only to the weekday evenings. And then the morning, when would the lights come on?
Probably, I would say 6:30 or 7 o'clock. We want to make sure I don't know what time the employees are getting there, but we want to make sure it's adequately lighted for safety for their employees in the winter months.
7.
So 7. I would maybe ask for 6:30 or 7 o'clock, just because it's not unreasonable in the morning hours in that area. But if they say 7, that's 7 works.
Say 7. Okay.
Right, so that will be the 7th condition that I've noted. Lights to turn on at 7 a.m. And will be turned off by 9 p.m.
Great. And I noted as well that there's no condition regarding the maintenance of the waste area, that's been addressed as a matter of testimony, and that any issues, should they arise, would likely be addressed first as a good neighbor, but also potentially through the Department of Health. So wonderful. Who would like to begin deliberations? Mr. Mullen?
I was just looking up the hours of Joe's Pizza as we were talking about that. And I would bring to the board's attention that the lights would still be on till at least 10 o'clock, Tuesday through Saturday. And, that's sort of how I'm thinking about this application. And I lament the disappearance of Joe's Pizza, but I think for the community in terms of the intensity of use, this is going to be a big improvement. Certainly the site can accommodate the lower intensity usage. And I think the traffic study adds a great deal of clarity to that. Also, I think, it was an interesting discussion on the whole, the use and the intent of the ordinance around the veterinary use and sort of the thought process behind not having that included. And I appreciate Mr. Barron's clarifications and, thinking about how the applicant intends on using this, the conditions that we've layered on in terms of prohibiting overnight boarding and such. I think I feel more comfortable permitting this use when it's not expressly permitted in this zone. And overall, giving Summit residents and all of the new dog owners another option here is a net positive to the community. And, welcoming another small business into town is certainly a good thing. So I'm in favor.
Yeah, I'm in favor too. I appreciate the applicant's efforts to address the concerns expressed both by zoning board members and the neighbors. And I agree with what Mr. Mullen said. They've proven that the property is suitable for the use. This use is less intense. They're making attractive improvements to the building. I don't see any negative impacts on the neighborhood. If anything, they may be positives. I also will miss Joe's Pizzeria. I can literally walk to it from where I live. So that was a nice place to get takeout, but life goes on. So I'm enthusiastically in favor of this application.
I just do want to also jump in, just keeping in mind the enhanced standards that we're dealing with, that the board is to make clear and specific findings, that this site is particularly suited for the proposed use, and also that there are no negative or there's no inconsistencies with the zoning ordinance and the master plan. So just if the additional board members could hit on those particular facts and be sure to clearly articulate your findings to those. We just want to make sure that all the standards are clearly addressed in the decision.
Mr. Steiner, would you care to opine on
I knew you were going to do that.
what just got spoon-fed to us? Go ahead.
I hear it, but I think we have to look first, as Ms. Toth said, that we're looking at the fact that it's not in there. But when we look at other areas of the zoning ordinance, and I did in that same retail, we do encourage our residents to have pets. A, we have pet licenses. B, we have dog and cat licenses, and we encourage having pet stores, groomers, et cetera, in neighborhood business areas, et cetera, all in other zones throughout the town as part of the retail services. So somehow we left out that, and I think that's one of the things zoning boards do, is correct errors that have been made. And we're allowing, we have to look at it in that sense of why wasn't it put in, et cetera, and does it make sense that we should indeed bring to the council and to the planning board this issue, but not withhold permission for the current applicant as he moves forward, trying to provide a service that we obviously know our residents need because we encourage them to have pets. It makes sense to have this application, and all of the items that Andy talked about. We look at them, and it makes sense, as far as I'm concerned, to move this application forward.
Mr. Malloy?
Yeah, I have one thing here. While we have this facility here in Summit, it's not really just for Summit, and it might attract other clients from several towns that they do not have the same facility in this neighborhood. And what I would like for the conditions to add the time, while we have the time, I recall it used to be on by appointment only. And I think this should be conditioned as by appointment only. That will make me more comfortable with this application.
Maybe just some brief additional testimony from the applicant. Mr. LaPerry, could you clarify, is most of the service provided on an appointment basis?
Yeah, I'll have Dr. Lyons could answer that for you directly.
Yes, appointment only. There are definitely delineations between walk-in and emergency clinics like VEG over on Route 22 in Springfield, and our type of practice, which would be by appointment only.
Okay.
I mean, the idea here is to avoid clients coming and waiting in the background with their dogs and cats that might be disturbing to a neighborhood.
Yeah,
absolutely do not encourage that.
Yeah, no, they agree. Their business model, like just as they are not having any overnight boarding, it's by an appointment only. That's the business that they're going to operate at the location.
And our pledge, our testimony is to provide that level of service for the need that's there. You know, we have 2 veterinarians here that are willing to work full-time at this practice, which is really a boon compared to how most of that start. And then, you know, our plan is to add more if more is needed, so we can see everyone at their appointments, you know, as much as we need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Millay. Any other board members have comments they'd care to offer?
Can I just add one more thing about the location? We already have an entity called the Summit Dog and Cat Hospital. So we already have one of these. So I don't know, it's a Morris Turnpike in Summit. Summit Dog and Cat Hospital. So it being left out made them non-conforming, I guess. But I have a feeling Andy's going to tell me I'm not allowed to talk about this, but it's still an issue of why would we prevent competition to somebody else who's already in town?
Andy, do you care to opine, or you don't have to?
Well, we don't know the status, whether it's non-conforming, whether they got a variance. I certainly don't know the status of that additional property. It's not specific to this site. It's, as Joe suggested, probably not something that should be considered as far as this application is concerned.
Okay, Ms. Toth?
Well, I'll just point out it may be called the Summit Dog and Cat Hospital, but it is on the other side of Route 24.
But its address is in Summit.
Its address is in Summit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, it actually is in Summit. That old Peapack Gladstone branch over there, it's also in Summit. Which isn't existing anymore, but it used to be there.
And that boarding place, that dog and that dog boarding place.
Which I believe was a case that we all heard.
Right. All right. Any further comments regarding this application? It is fun to relive, was that VIP puppy spa, I believe it was, but
good memory.
All right, I'll just conclude in noting with respect to Andy's prompt that this application is particularly well suited with respects to goals 3 and 5 of the master plan. Goal 3 calling to improve connectivity between people and places to promote a healthy and vibrant community. I'm told walking your dog is one of those benefits. And then goal 5 being to build economic resiliency by supporting reinvestment. I do love a good slice of Joe's Pizza, but I've got to believe that this investment in the physical property and what we hope to be many long years of a successful and thriving business will benefit the broader Summit community. So for those 2 additional reasons, I could support the application and would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the application with all the conditions outlined earlier.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Wickets, a second. Chris, you give us a roll call?
Certainly. Vice Chairwoman New,
Yes.
Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartzstein,
Yes.
Mr. Millay,
Yes.
and Chairman Spur.
Yes. All right, thank you, Drs. Lyon, Mr. LaPerry. We have just a couple of quick administrative items, board members, so hang tight. and then we'll get you out.
Thank you very much, everyone. We really appreciate your time and your consideration, and I'm sure these applicants are extremely happy with your decision and your well thought out rationale. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and have a great night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
You
very
too.
much.
Thank you. All right, Chris, resolutions for memorialization. What do you got
Yeah,
for us?
Same eligible voting members for both. So those members are Chairman Spur, Vice Chairwoman Newell, Mr. Yuko, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Schwartzstein, Mr. Malay, and Ms. Toth. So our first one is 101 Canoe Parkway, application ZB 21-2055. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second,
All right, Chairman Spur,
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Newell,
Yes.
Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartzstein,
Yes.
Mr. Malay,
Yes.
and Ms. Toth.
yes.
And the next resolution is 14 Blackburn Place, application ZB 21-2056. Somebody like to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, Chairman Spur,
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Newell,
Yes.
Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartzstein,
Yes.
Mr. Malay,
Yes.
and Ms. Toth.
Yes.
And we have a set of minutes from July 7th of this year to approve, and we need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
All right, last quick comment is our next meeting scheduled for September 8th, a regular meeting. We intend to return to council chambers. I'll reach out to the board with some further clarification as to how we intend to safely return to council chambers. I've heard from a couple of board members that have shared some concern about our ability to operate safely indoors. So we'll of course continue to monitor guidance from the CDC, New Jersey Department of Health, and move forward in consultation with the city clerk's office and others that we deem appropriate. So we'll take that offline, share that, keep that with Chris and Andy, but want to make sure that each of you do share any questions, concerns as September 8th approaches, and barring an epsilon variant or something crazy, we do end up back in council chambers on September 8th. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good
Have a
night.
happy rest of your
Thank
month. All right, bye.
Bye.